situations that you envision yourself getting into. And then a good night's sleep, you know, a big plate of food and a good night's sleep. Again, this is more reflection and I guess a little bit of science, but I think sleep was an actual critical factor, not just for me, but just generally for anybody who is competing at any level, is to make sure that you're well rested. Whatever a good night's sleep might mean to the individual. For me, it was 6.5, 7 hours max. But if I got less than that, then I wasn't really in an optimum state the day after. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that would take me up to the sort of like the night before a game. Very good question, because nerves. I mean, even if I had to go and bat in a charity game now, there'd be a few butterflies, even at my age. So it is relevant. I'm going to start very big picture and then narrowing. Okay, the worst, normally speaking, nerves tend to hit most if you're not sure about what you're doing. So let me start long before the game starts. If I haven't prepared well, if I'm not confident that I have the capacity to deal with what is being thrown at me as a batter, then I'm going to get more nervous than I should be. Because there's an element of doubt, there's an element of fear, there's an element of what the hell am I doing here type thing. So the first issue for me is putting in the work to ensure that when I'm going out to bat, I'm not second guessing my ability to cope. That's the first thing. Now let's assume that we've taken that out of the way. Then you have your regular match day butterflies, you know, the stomach. I mean, I've had it to the point where I've been physically ill before going to bat, but it didn't bother me because it was, at the time, it was my normal and it calmed me down and it was fine. What helped was, one, knowing what you're going through. So yeah, I'm sitting down and I'm next into bat and my stomach is a little bit, you know, it's churning a little bit, you know, I have to take a sip of water every now and again. That for me didn't scare me. That was actually me getting ready for battle. Didn't bother me at all. Breathing helped. I didn't know how to do that very well when I was younger, but I was taught it in my 20s and I found that it helped. Sometimes I would go and lie on my back in the dressing room and just breathe for 5 minutes because I was getting too caught up in what was happening and I was starting to actually bat before I got out to bat sort of thing, and it was starting to drain my reserves before I even got out there. So breathing on the day, and even when I was out batting before, you know, at the start of an innings, yes, I'm nervous. But again, breathing and a little bit of self-talk, you know, reminding myself that, Jimmy, we've practiced against faster bowlers than this, so don't be worried, or you've played against better spinners than this. Don't get ahead of yourself. You're good enough, and that helped as well. And then, last but not least, the famous line of staying in the moment. If I focus just on this one delivery and stop thinking about the 10 more that might come after and knock my head off or get me out, it usually kept me a little bit calmer than if my imagination was allowed to run away and I started playing a lot of very fantastic what-if games. You know, what if it hits me in the head? What if it hits me in the rib? You know, it's stuff like that. So a combination of good preparation, accepting what is normal for me and not fighting it just prior to going to bat. Accepting that there is going to be butterflies and it's normal, and then breathing. I'll put those four as what helped me on the day. We're getting into sort of very individual, a sort of very individual area. So different people did things differently. By personality, I needed to be in my own place pre-batting. So at any level, if I'm playing a Mickey Mouse game, or if I'm playing a test match, I want to be sitting. I don't mind sitting in a group, but I'm not speaking. I'm in my own thoughts. There are a lot of times when I'm actually doing a bit of visualization, just imagining what I might be facing and all the rest of it. But I don't want to, if I'm going to have a conversation and I must lead it, it must be when I want to speak on my topic. I don't want to take part in somebody else's conversation. That's pre-batting. While I'm batting,
concentrate, watch it, not him.
if I'm not running, then I switch off again. When I'm batting well, I used to do that without thinking. When I was out of form, this is in hindsight, but when I was out of form, I used to find that when I should be having downtime in between deliveries, I was still mentally engaged. And it was actually a sign that I was struggling. And it usually meant that if you grafted your way to a very ugly 40 or 50, you were very tired at the end of it, because instead of taking that 30 seconds in between deliveries to just go blank and refresh and recharge, you were still sort of very hyped mentally. So it's something that I actually try and get young players to think about, to find a way, and different people do it differently, but find a way to really come down in between deliveries. Because I guess at club level, your openers or your numbers, so you're trying to bat for about 50 overs. Obviously, at the red ball level, we're trying to bat for a day. So, you still want to have something in your mental gas tank, say after tea, sort of thing. So that would generally be me. And keeping my mind as fresh as possible should allow me, when I need to lock on, to lock on as best as I can. I'll put a group of them together. I don't have one that is the best. But throughout the career, and I'm going to go all the way back to school cricket, right? School cricket through under 19s, through first class, through tests, one days, whatever. All those knocks where the odds were stacked against me, and I came out on top. And more importantly, we won, would be my best knocks. So, I have a highest test score of 208, but it's not one of my best knocks. It's not even in the top 10. Whereas I battled for 48 not out against Pakistan, that won us a test match, helped win a series. So 48 versus 208, people might say, well, it shouldn't be a contest, but I say the same thing, but in the reverse. The 48 meant more than the 208. The 208 was on a wicket where everybody was scoring hundreds, and 500 played 500, game drawn, everybody went home happy, except the bowlers. So, I can think of playing all schools here in Jamaica and a particular innings. I can think of a couple at first class level. I can think of a few test matches, one-day internationals, but the criteria remain the same. The odds were against me / us, the team, and you managed to rise above it, and you got the result. And I'll just add that is the drug that kept me going back for more as a player. That is a drug that would make me run 10 more miles in practice or bat for an extra hour, because you wanted the feeling that you got after a performance like that. It's very hard to explain, but it is. I've listened to drug addicts speak about what it feels like. I've never taken drugs, but if they are to be believed, then it's the closest thing I can think of to it for me as a player. So I'm sorry that I can't give you a score or an opponent, but yeah, there've been a few, but for those reasons. So yeah, I hope that sort of answers it in some way.
Amidst indescribable tension, they inch closer to the target. Adams finally squirting a 2 on the leg side to bring the scores level.
West Indies cannot lose. It's the first time the West Indies captain has allowed himself the satisfaction of a smile.
Then, moments later, it was all over. The Caribbean celebrations began in earnest, with an ecstatic Jimmy Adams ending up on 48 not out.
The West Indies have won by 1 wicket. An amazing test match.
It will have
Oh dear, that's an interesting one. I don't think there's one mindset tree. I think there are quite a few components to it. One is it has to be something that you want to do, and I'm not being flippant when I say it. A lot of people will say, I want to bat for 50 overs, or I want to bat for a day. But your actions will show, first of all, whether that is true or not. Most batters who, if you'd have them in club cricket, who regularly bat 45 or 50 overs or more, somewhere in their DNA, they love to bat. They love to bat so much that along the way, along to getting to the point where they are in regularly soaking up most of the overs in a league game, they would have made sure that technically they were good enough to survive 50 overs. So they were good enough to get a start, and usually, and this might answer another question that might come later, but usually in that innings, they had to decide, because what I found is that the ego plays quite a big role in most of our lives as batsmen, but the decision had to be made on, I'm in, do I want to increase my risk level or not? And most batsmen who regularly bat at any level, so be it club second team, first class, test cricket, all of them will tell you, if they're being honest, that there is a point in time where the little man is asking the question, how long do you want to bat today? And how much risk are you prepared to take on board? The ego part of you wants to dominate, wants to, make a reply to maybe something that was said 2 overs before or whatever. But most of these good players have learned to control that urge, and they keep that risk factor within a level that will keep them going over after over after over after over after over. It breaks down differently for different players in terms of what shots they choose to play, what are the high-risk shots, and which ones aren't. So if I use myself as an example, a sweep shot for me wasn't a high-risk shot. I played it well. Yes, I got out a few times over my career, but a sweep for me was a safe shot. A sweep for somebody else who doesn't sweep well might not be a safe shot, especially if they're playing it because they're under pressure and they don't think they have any other options and the little man is getting in the air. So a sweep shot for them would be an increased risk level. So I guess to put it all together is one, and I'm going to keep coming back to this, you're practicing what you want to do on a weekend. So if you're getting out 10 times in 25 minutes on a Thursday night, chances are you're not going back to 50 overs on a Saturday, okay? So somewhere in your makeup, you have to have an experience of giving up something, keeping your risk levels low, and that is something that you practice so that when you go into the game, you know exactly where your low risk scoring areas are and where your high risk scoring areas are. And then when you get to that point or points in your innings where you're being tempted to come out of that risk level that you think is acceptable, you can control that thinking and stay within, because it's most of us, if we're being honest as batsmen, and I'm not being disrespectful to bowlers, but I don't think most of the times I got out, it was a great delivery. I think that in majority of my dismissals, I was guilty of poor thinking. And that comes through practice. But there are going to be times in your innings when you know that question is being asked internally, and your success and the length of time that you bat is going to come down to how well you answer that internally first before the actual shot is played. That might resonate with a few batters here it might not, but that was my experience. Okay, so I'm gonna make an assumption. I'm gonna make an assumption that the first 10 or 20 runs came through what I would call my normal approach to starting an innings. So I've been very selective. I know where my high risk and my low risk areas are. I've stayed low risk at the start of my innings, and 10 or 20 runs, let's say half an hour, 45 minutes, I'm on 20. And I think I'm comfortable for the most part. The big question for me is a little bit of what I alluded to earlier. You have that sense that you're in. And one of the common themes for us as batsmen is you can then lose a level of arousal that can set you up for making mistakes. So you sort of exhale and you're comfortable and you're in that good place and you maybe have a couple of boundaries and there is a tendency to start going below that level of arousal that you had when you just went to the crease. That kept you sort of very, not tight, but very focused, very clued in, very watchful. And the key that I found is how to maintain that for as long as you're batting, however long that is. So it doesn't stop you from getting into, people might say, well, okay, Jack's starting to open up now. But even in the shots that you're playing when you're opening up, there are certain things that are still consistent. You're making good decisions early and you're executing well. So you're doing nothing different than you did in the first 10 to 20 runs. But you still have a level of alertness and a level of arousal that is almost keeping you on your toes, as opposed to the times when you've probably gotten out and thought, well, it wasn't that great a delivery, but was I in the same place that I was mentally in my first 45 minutes? And I think that's one of the key, it's actually a key issue, Jack, because there are many reasons why people don't carry on. There are many reasons why people average 25 instead of 45. And I'm not saying it's the only reason, but for me, I had to guard against coming down, sort of like lowering myself mentally when I felt I was in. So I might feel like I'm in today when I'm on 15, or tomorrow it might be when I'm 35. But for me, there was usually a point in time when I thought to myself, I can sort of exhale now and cruise a little bit. And I had to be very careful when those thoughts came into my head. And sometimes I had to self-talk my way back up to a level of arousal that would ensure that, the ball that was coming 2 miles an hour quicker or that spun a little bit more than I was expecting didn't catch me off guard. So that for me was very critical. Other players might have issues that prevented them, but that was my biggest challenge. I was generally pretty good at getting starts, but in hindsight, I would have wasted quite a few of them over the course of a career because of that issue more than any other. I think two things might need to happen. One, he needs to maybe understand his game a little bit more. And I'll come back again to what I said earlier. Has he, as a batsman, has he worked out what his acceptable risk levels are? Some batsmen genuinely don't know and need to start thinking about where those acceptable levels are. And then the other question is all him. Are you prepared to operate within those levels or not? No, some players will tell you that they're not interested. They want to take the risk, they're risk takers, and if they come off and they get to 30 with 5 6s, they're happy as Larry, and you won't change them. But at least have the conversation. So are you aware of what your risk levels are, your acceptable risk levels? Are you practicing within them? Are you practicing playing balls on merit within that risk level? And then on a match day, are you prepared to to operate within those bands. And if a player says yes to those, then genuinely over a period of time, generally, you will see, I would think, some improvement. But some of it, a lot of it has to do with the player becoming more self-aware and then making I would say the million-dollar decisions on whether they want it or not. Does that apply to you, Matt? Just curious.
Yeah, that's me all over. If it gets to 20, I'm happy. 20 and 10 balls, I'm out. that's my Saturday over.
Okay. I think there are certain things that apply across the board. So you didn't have to put average or club players. You could have just put batters in general, Joe. I think when you talk about trying to get better, there has to be a level of specificity in what you're doing. And maybe players might need a little bit of guidance towards that. So what is it that will make me a better player? Do I need a tighter defense? Do I need to add 1 or 2 attacking strokes? Do I need to improve my concentration, my decision making? These are for most players, these are areas that can be identified fairly easily. And what I've found at a lot of levels, including club level, is that most club batsmen, if you ask them, well, what areas do you think you could get strong at? They'll give you a list. They know. It's not like they don't know, okay? So the million-dollar question is, okay, fine, so you know what we're gonna do about it. If you want to do something about it. Now, you know, let's be honest, right? Club cricket, 1 game a weekend, maybe 2, 1 practice evening a week. You have your families, your job, your whatever. I can see sometimes where you might not be driven to move beyond the identification stage. So yes, I know I can't pull very well, but listen, hey, I still love me and this is me and I'm happy. But if they say that they want to improve, then you then start saying, okay, fine, let's start implementing a plan to do that. And even if it's 1 day a week, you know, take a long-term approach. If you're 21 now, let's get you playing a good pull shot by the time you're 24. Do you see what I'm saying? So and then being specific. So again, we come up to the same practice session scenario that P raised earlier. You know, the generic one-size-fits-all session might not suit me for the next 4 weeks because I have a specific issue, because I spoke to my coaches about improving in this area, and I'm going to try and bite into that aspect of my game for the next month and hopefully see some results on the back of it. So the challenge for me at club level is not to identify the areas. I found most bowlers and batters could tell you the areas of weakness, but to translate that into an action plan to improve by being specific about it for a period of time was the biggest challenge, because then, you know, it could be that the practice session becomes less of a social issue and more of a, well, I'm here to do something specific, and the ha-ha moments can wait until tonight when we're in the bar type thing. You know what I mean? So it's an interesting area. At the professional level, the system will kick you out if you don't do it. Whereas it's more of an option at the club level, but the process, Joe, remains the same. Where do I see my weak areas? Do I want to improve? And if I do, what is the plan? And that works for any level, but the answers might be different depending on what level you're at. But it's pretty much the same. Again, how you sell it to club players who are playing for fun, and the improvement might come at the cost of time, effort, work, a bit of sweat. You know, it just depends from player to player. Again, I'm speaking from limited experience, but I wouldn't get more specific than that. Any sort of preparation, whether it be mental, physical, or technical, it has to start with how you practice and how you prepare. So in a sort of very broad sense. If you're going from second team cricket to first team cricket, if you've scored runs in second team cricket, and chances are you're going to get promoted to first team cricket. Let's use batting as an example. What are some of the differences between batting at the two levels? One, you might get fewer bad balls. You might get a higher standard of a good ball, so to speak. And the question is, can you recreate that in the practice sessions so that when that player goes into the first team, he has some history of dealing with that level of cricket. And then obviously that player will have to adapt as quickly as possible, but that's bog standard. So that applies to a player going from second 11 to first 11 as much as it does for a player going from first class to test cricket. So I would say, and that applies to mental as well, because if you have a training session where normally a second team batsman would bat in the second team nets against second team bowlers, if he's coming into first team cricket, obviously you try and get him in first team nets as quickly as you can. And just make sure that you deliver the highest quality bowling that you can so that he can get a feel for what it is like to be batting at that level. And hopefully if you have a decent enough bowling attack, it at least will give him, there's a lot that he's going to get from experience going forward, but at least you can give him mentally an expectation of what it is like at the next level by way of, the standard of bowling, the scarcity of bad balls, etc. And the same thing for bowlers, get them into that first team environment as quickly as possible. And what you can do sometimes, if they're up for it, is just maybe some very relaxed sessions where some of the older guys can just plant a few seeds, let them know what they can expect, but do it in a way that doesn't freak them out, keeps them calm, and still leaves them with that sense of excitement and expectation for match day. But it's no different from any other level. When you're jumping any other level, you do as much as you can in the preparation to mirror what they're gonna face, and then you give them a bit of time, because it does take some getting used to when you jump levels. I hope that answers. I hope that helps a little bit with that question. That's a challenging one. If you're only practicing once a week, I would think that in a weird sense you might not have to worry about being repetitive, because it's only a once a week session, as opposed to if you're practicing 5 times a week, then yeah, let's do something different on day 3, because if you did the same thing for 5 days. But just in terms of keeping people engaged, there are certain key issues, again, irrespective of what level you're playing at, that you spend some time and think about variety. Okay, so you have the end goal. You want your batters to get this out of the session, your bowlers to get that out of the session, your fielding sessions to achieve whatever. There are 10 different ways to skin the cat, but it takes planning and it takes a bit of thinking and some collaboration. So, but you have to balance that against at the club level. If guys are only coming together 1 day a week, then what I would find difficult or a really big challenge is how to meet everybody's expectation on 1, 2.5, 3 hour session per week. It's not an easy call, and I'm speaking up with my coach's hat on. But I would say be very clear on what the objectives are for the session, and then try and be as varied as possible in terms of how the session is rolled out, how it's constructed. Because I guess, yeah, probably, I don't know what you find now, but I found at club level, with the clubs that we practiced at, by the time you got down to late July, August, and this is with a club that practiced 2-3 times a week, it got to the point where we started doing a lot of non-cricket stuff, even though we're at a cricket practice. So the nets got shorter, but we were doing other stuff as a group, as a unit, that I guess built other things. So it built teamwork, camaraderie, that kind of thing, which did help us on a weekend. But guys that got tired of, no matter how much we structured it, it was hard. You know, certain principles you can stick to, and I guess sometimes as well, if you try to get as much as you can, where you can you can what's the best way to put it? You can deal with individual issues. So it might be that Joe Bloggs doesn't bat for 15 or 20 minutes today. You might decide, listen, you're going to go into one net and just work on your pull shot, and it's 15 minutes of pulls because he feels in a good enough place, but you've actually given him something personal, which probably means more to him than a bog standard, 10, 15 minutes with 15 guys running in, and, by the time you blink, it's over. And then it doesn't deal with his insecurity that I've been out pulling the last 3 weekends, and I'd really love if somebody could give me something more personal. So it's really sitting down as a group of coaches and sometimes thinking beyond just your quote-unquote group sesh and thinking, well, okay, we've got some individuals here that could or maybe would like to do some individual stuff if you have the facilities. Having a chat with those individuals, and you might be surprised what comes back to you. I mean, some of them might grab it, some of them might say no, that they prefer the bog standard stuff, but at least now you know, and at least you have players who are starting to appreciate that you're actually taking the time to think about them as individuals as opposed to just putting down a generic one-size-fits-all session. But I'm going to say this, once a week, it's difficult, it's not easy. Especially sort of early season when everybody, is keen, wants a hit, wants a ball, and it's going to be dark in 2 hours' time and you're trying to get 25 batters and 30 bowlers through. But that's what makes coaching at club level interesting and challenging. I don't know if that was a suitable answer, but I don't think I did more than highlight the challenge. But I think if you can think about the individuals a little bit more and just remember variety, I'd put those as the 2 big sort of key points for that. I've been told to keep the answers short, so I'm going to go straight to the point. What you're speaking to is a question of leadership, Aaron. If the leadership of the club wants to go further, then once that decision is made, you communicate that right throughout the club, but also communicate it with a plan on how you intend to do it. Then you go through the whole process of getting buy-in and so on, but don't get halfway through a season and the club leadership expects everybody to have moved on to another level from where you are now, and the club membership didn't buy into it, didn't know about it, only became aware of it, when you had results that were either going for or against you. So it's good that you want to move to the next level. Make sure it is a club leadership decision that is agreed on, and you plan to back it up, but then you've also taken the time to sell it to the rest of the club membership, because you can drive as much as you want. If you don't have them behind you, it's not going to happen. So it starts with the leadership of the club. And then you filter it down sort of like the food chain. And that is, yes, it is a very simple answer, but it is the answer in effect. That won't be driven by 1 or 2 players in any one of your teams. It will be a decision made at the executive level within your club. As a player, 2 things: enjoy what you're doing and try and maintain a level of perspective. It's never as bad as you think it is. You're never as good as you think you are. As coach, love them before you lead them. Really try and get to know your players and love them. Look out for them as individuals, and they'll be more receptive to anything. And as an administrator, paperwork is a bitch, man. If I can get somebody to do it for me, then pay the money and get it done. So those are the 3 biggest lessons.
Fair enough. Okay.
if I can, before we log off, if I can say thanks for the invitation. I've enjoyed it. I find this hour has gone very quickly. And just to say that a bit of my own history, in 20 something years of professional cricket in the UK, I only played one season of county cricket, and the rest of that was club cricket. So I identify very closely with club cricket. All of my professional life was built around club cricket, both in Jamaica and in England. And I really appreciate what you are trying to do as a club. And I'm glad to have been able to be a part of today's session and to wish you all as a club. I know all clubs, in fact, the whole sport is facing severe challenges at the minute, but I want to wish you all as a club all the very best now and when we start playing cricket again, and hopefully you can get back to what you do well, which is run a pretty successful cricket club. So thanks again for the invitation and good luck to everybody.